submit them. Welcome everybody. Before we get started, I want to let everybody know that this is a virtual meeting. And so I've put on the screen the protocol for a virtual meeting. First is to please keep your microphones muted during the presentation and while others are speaking. That helps to make sure that the background noise doesn't interfere with those that are talking or interfere with the presentation. If you also will turn off your camera for increased bandwidth. Sometimes if you have your camera on, we can see your face, but at the same time, it does end up maybe decreasing your bandwidth to be able to listen to the presentation and could end up missing some of it. So you turn your camera off, that'll help you on your end to be able to see the presentation better. During the presentation, which it is a pre-recorded presentation, which I'll be starting in a minute, but during the presentation, at any time, you can type your comments in the chat box. And then once the pre-recorded presentation is complete, we will be going to the chat box to read your comments or questions. And then we'll also give you an opportunity to speak at the end of the presentation. If you would prefer, just put your name in the chat box saying you'd like to speak, and we will be monitoring those and calling on you, trying to keep some sort of an order in terms of people that need to or want to speak at tonight's meeting. And then I want to remind everybody that this is being recorded. So the recording of this will be on the study website, which you see here. And we will also have a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation for you to look at separately in its own file as well. So again, thank you for that. And at this time, before we get into the pre-recorded portion of the presentation, I would like to welcome our district engineer. We have Francisco Sanchez, who was recently appointed as the District 2 engineer in the Roswell area. And first of all, congratulations, Francisco, and I'd like to turn it over to you for some opening remarks.
I appreciate that, Bert. As Bert stated, I've been selected as the district engineer for District 2. It's an honor to be selected. I've strived through my whole career to be in a position to truly impact people. And I'm in this position now where, I can have positive impact on communities we serve, the public, just like everybody on this public meeting. We want change on US 380. We want to see improvements. We want to see the safety enhanced. My family, myself, we drive this road all the time. And when my wife's driving with my family, I get nervous with them out there. And every one of us has been there on a late Friday or Sunday behind those 10 to 15 cars and just thinking, should I pass? Should I not pass? It's always an uncomfortable position on some of these crowded nights. So we appreciate everybody that's participating in this meeting. Please provide any comment, no matter what you think. It's insignificant, it's not. We are here to listen. BHI has done a good job on this study. They've gone extensively through the safety factors, the roadway. It's one of the best studies I've seen done. But we want to hear from you. We want to hear your concerns. And like I said, that is very important to us, and we're here to listen and hear your concerns. One thing that I want to mention about studies, it's important to us for this process to get as much information we can. But right now, we're in the position to finish the study and continue to design. There's no construction funding identified yet. So be patient. These things take time. We want to follow the process. The sooner we can get this project designed, the better it is for us to go out and find available funding. So once again, just want to thank everybody for your participation and BHI for putting on this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. And now, without any further ado, we will jump into our presentation.
Hey, Bert, this is Rick. If you don't mind, if I could just say a couple of things.
Sure, Mr. Padilla, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And sorry, folks, I'll be brief. I first of all, just on behalf of the executive team, myself, of course, Secretary San, I've always like to welcome everybody. We did a bunch of these virtual type meetings during the legislative session, but I'll tell you, this will be my first public meeting. So welcome everybody. Please be patient with the process. Just want to thank everybody for their attendance and their comments. We certainly appreciate it. We have Francisco Sanchez, as DE now, so you're in good hands. And let me be the first to congratulate him. Of course, we're very proud of him and expect big things, right? So without further ado, thank you all. I'll be listening in to this. Fortunately, my daughter has a volleyball game now at 6 o'clock, so I'll be listening in. So if you hear a volleyball game in the background, that's me. But again, thanks everybody. Bert, thank your team and my team. Good job, and have a good meeting. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, Mr. Padilla. And with that, we'll ask you to please mute your microphones again, and we will jump into the presentation. Welcome to the US 380 Public Information. I'm going to pause it because I found out that we are not hearing the video. So let me try that again. So if I share this.
We heard it for a second, Bert.
Okay. There we go. And I'm going to jump back to the video. And I'm going to restart it from the beginning. And here we go. Welcome to the US 380 Public Information Meeting. This meeting is for the New Mexico Department of Transportation's US 380 corridor east of Roswell, control number 2100740. This study is being conducted by the NMDOT in cooperation with the Federal Highway Administration and is being done by the consultant team of Bohannon Houston Parametrics and WSP. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present the findings and recommendations of our Phase AB study, which completes our evaluation of alternatives. Tonight, we will give you a brief introduction of our team members, an overview of the study, a discussion of the alternatives that were evaluated, a description of the preferred alternative and our recommended improvements, the next steps in the process, and at the end, giving you a chance to provide your input through questions and comments. And now let me turn it over to the project development engineer, AJ Romero.
Good evening, everyone. I'm AJ Romero with your New Mexico Department of Transportation, and on behalf of our department and also our engineering consultant firm Bohannon Houston, welcome to tonight's virtual public meeting for the US 380 corridor. This is our second public involvement effort for this study. As you may recall, we had our first virtual public meeting back in late September 2020. Tonight's meeting will focus on alternative countermeasures considered for any problematic or deficient elements of the corridors discovered in our findings. and also to present the preferred recommended alternative for the US 380 corridor. Our study team members from the department include Francisco Sanchez, District 2, Alan Bradley from District 2, Michael Smelker from South Region Design, Jason Smith from Environmental, and Jennifer Mullins from the Environmental Bureau. And our consultant study team is led by Albert Thomas, who will be presenting. It consists of Bohannon Houston Incorporated, WSP, Parametrics, and Horrocks. The project study on US 380 begins at mile marker 158 over in Roswell and proceeds east through the remainder of Chavez County, crosses into Lee County. It proceeds through the communities of Caprock and Tatum and continues eastward until it terminates at the Texas state line for a total length of 84 miles. This project serves as an important link in the transportation network of Southeast New Mexico in that it carries approximately 2,000 to 3,000 vehicles per day and is expected to carry up to 4,000 vehicles per day by the year 2040. As mentioned earlier, we're here tonight to present our findings and recommended alternatives. The purpose of this project is based on the need to improve the traffic operations, resulting in a safer, more comfortable traveling experience. There is also a need to reduce safety concerns, thus minimizing the potential for severe crashes, and also to correct physical geometric deficiencies, thus creating better roadway conditions. Alternative evaluation criteria include safety, traffic operations, right-of-way, environmental, drainage, utility impacts, adjacent property impacts, public input, implementation phasing, which is pretty much phasing of the corridor to smaller projects, constructability, and construction costs. And at this time, I'd like to turn it on over to Albert Thomas of Bohannon Houston so we can go ahead and present the alternatives evaluated and recommended alternative to proceed.
Thank you, AJ. Before I show the alternatives that were evaluated, let me first remind you of the existing conditions assessment that was done by our team for this project. The evaluation of existing conditions was discussed in detail at the public meeting in September, but let me talk about a few of the highlights. The existing US 380 corridor is a 2-lane rural highway with a 12-foot driving lane in each direction and paved shoulders that vary in width from 6 foot to 10 foot wide. At approximately milepost 163, which is about 5 miles east of Roswell, there's an existing passing lane section for the eastbound traffic. This allows for safe passing of slower moving vehicles by having a dedicated passing lane for the eastbound traffic. Within the town of Tatum, there is a 4-lane urban section with curb and gutter and sidewalk. The evaluation of existing conditions took into consideration traffic operations, physical deficiencies, design deficiencies based on current design criteria, safety, and other factors. This is a map that we showed you at the last public meeting, which shows the location of crashes that occurred on the corridor during the years of 2014 through 2018. As we developed our study alternatives, we took into consideration these factors as we evaluated the different alternatives. The no build is considered for every study. This becomes a basis that all other alternatives are evaluated against. With the no build, the existing highway will continue to function as a 2-lane road, unchanged from its current condition. It will continue to have 1 passing lane at milepost 163 for eastbound traffic. The only thing that would be done to the highway is to upgrade the condition of the existing pavement through maintenance activities and pavement rehabilitation projects. There are 10 major intersections along the corridor as shown in this list. With the no build, these intersections would remain in their current state of configuration and would not correct any sight distance issues that are at these intersections. If a build alternative is not selected out of this study process, the no build alternative becomes a default and the highway will remain in its current status. We evaluated 3 different alternatives. Alternative 1, as shown here, is the addition of passing lanes approximately every 7 to 10 miles in each direction. This sketch shows how a new lane will be added to the outside of the existing lane road to create a dedicated passing lane. The typical section on the top shows a new lane added to the left side or north side of US 380 to create a westbound passing lane. The typical section on the bottom shows a new lane added to the right side or south side of US 380 to create the eastbound passing lane. This is a plan view sketch of how this alternative 1 looks. Each passing lane will be approximately 1 mile to 1.5 miles in length. First, a passing lane in one direction, then switching to a passing lane in the opposite direction. These passing lanes will be separated by approximately 3 or 4 miles, depending on the physical constraints and the roadway conditions. This would result in each direction having their own passing lane about every 7 to 10 miles in the direction of travel. Alternative 2 will convert the existing 2-lane road to a continuous 3-lane road, and through striping create alternate passing lanes in each direction. The typical section shown here shows how the roadway would be widened to the north side of US 380 and then striped to either create a westbound dedicated passing lane, as shown in the typical section on top, or an eastbound passing lane, as shown by the typical section on the bottom. Here is a plan view that shows how the typical section will transition back and forth to create passing lanes in the middle of this 3-lane section. Alternative 3 is the side-by-side passing lane. With this alternative, dedicated passing lanes will be created by constructing a 4-lane section to replace the existing 2-lane road. Here is a plan view of this alternative. The passing lanes will be approximately 1 mile in length, and the 4-lane section will be constructed approximately every 5 miles along the corridor. In looking at these different alternatives, we conducted a detailed analysis to compare the benefits of each versus the impacts and costs associated with each alternative. And we are recommending that alternative 1 be selected as the preferred alternative. This alternative will add a new lane by widening to the outside and create a dedicated passing lane. This alternative will have a passing lane in only one direction at a time, and the passing lanes will be separated by a 2-lane section of road in between. Here is the plan view of this preferred alternative. As I mentioned previously, each passing lane will be about 1 mile to 1.5 miles long. In any one direction, there will be a dedicated passing lane for that direction of travel, spaced approximately every 7 to 10 miles along the corridor. The study team ranked each of these alternatives using the evaluation matrix shown here. The rankings were compiled, and as you can see from the results, alternative 1 ranked as the best overall. With this alternative, we are recommending 10 passing lanes in each direction with the possibility of an additional one in the westbound locations. The charts here show passing lanes for eastbound direction in the columns highlighted in green, and passing lanes for the westbound direction by the columns highlighted in blue. In between those passing lanes, the existing 2-lane highway will remain in place. So as you can see from this, the first passing lane in the eastbound direction would start at approximately milepost 165.2. And it would extend for 1 mile to milepost 166.2. And then it would transition back to a 2-lane road for approximately 2 miles, almost 3 miles. And then it would go to a westbound passing lane from milepost 169 to milepost 170. So in looking at this eastbound direction, you'd have a passing lane located from 165.2 to 166.2. And then the next one would be located at milepost 172 to milepost 173. Continuing then to 177.5 for the next passing lane in the eastbound direction. It would be about a mile long to 178.5. And continuing on 185 to 186.5, 193, 201.5 to 203, 214 to 215.5, 222.5 to 224, 228.5 to 229.5, and then the last one being from milepost 233.4 to 235. In the westbound direction coming out of the Texas, you would have from the Texas state line back to milepost 240, a 2-lane road. You would then have a passing lane about 1.5 miles long in the westbound direction from 239.7 to 238.2. And again, continuing, as you can see in this, in the westbound direction, so that you have a passing lane about every 7 to 10 miles. This rendering shows how the existing 2-lane road will be widened to create the dedicated passing lane. On the left-hand side is an existing photo taken with the drone of the 2-lane highway. On the right-hand side is a rendering of how the passing lane would be added so truck traffic and slower moving vehicles could move over to the right while faster moving vehicles have a dedicated passing lane. So the recommended improvements are to add the dedicated passing lane, as I just described, to modify existing intersections, adding turn lanes at each of the intersections, and mitigating sight distance issues at these existing intersections, to upgrade pavement and improve the surfacing conditions of the current 2-lane road, replace guardrail and roadside barriers to meet current standards, upgrade the drainage structures in the areas that are being widened for the new passing lanes, and to rehabilitate the bridge over the Pecos River with maintenance repairs on existing structures. The total construction cost for these recommended improvements is about $150 million. So what are the next steps? First, let me remind you where we are in the study process. Following the New Mexico Department of Transportation location studies process, we are completing the Phase B, which is the detailed evaluation of alternatives, and we are beginning to move into Phase C. During Phase C, there will be environmental investigations and a review of any environmental issues along the corridor to identify any impacts associated with the environmental resources in the area. And if mitigation is needed for those environmental resources, the study team will identify what mitigation measures might be required. In terms of next steps, we have just completed Phase A and B of the study process. And with that, we've identified the preferred alternative that I just recommended and described previously. Our next steps are the environmental document and the preliminary design, which are shown in blue. Once the preliminary design is completed and the environmental investigation and documentations are accepted, then the Department of Transportation will be able to move into the final design phase and develop the documents that are needed to take this project to bidding and construction. Throughout this entire process, we have gathered public input and will continue to gather public input throughout the project development stage and throughout the construction of the project. In terms of public input, we have held our first public information meeting last September, in September of 2020, where we were able to present to you the findings of our existing conditions and to gather your input and suggestions for what needed to be looked at for alternatives analysis. The meeting tonight is the second public information meeting for the project. With this, we've identified the alternatives that were investigated, and we've given you our recommendations for a preferred alternative. If you have comments and would like to provide comments to our study team, please submit them to us no later than April 2nd, so we can take those comments into consideration as we complete the final study for this corridor and begin the preliminary design of the project. We have also had agency and stakeholder coordination meetings and will continue to meet with the agency and stakeholders throughout the entire process as well. Our goal, as I mentioned during the September meeting, is to establish and maintain a consistent flow and exchange of information. Information is available through the study website. On that website, there is an interactive map that can be used for you to provide your comments. And there's also contact information so we can have open communication between public stakeholders and the study team. We want to gather your input throughout this project design and construction phase. Your input helps us make this project better. That concludes our presentation, and now it's time to take your comments and to answer any questions that you might have. I want to remind you that after tonight's meeting, if you'd like to provide input, you can do it by providing information in the project website, which is identified here. You can also get to the project website using the QR code on the right-hand side of this figure. You can email us at us380@bhinc.com or give us a phone call at 505-798-7857. You can also provide us your input by sending us written correspondence at US380 Study, Bohannon, Houston, Incorporated, 7500 Jefferson Street Northeast, Albuquerque, New Mexico, 87109. To provide your input tonight, we ask that you please type your comments in the chat box, or you can raise your hand in the Zoom application to speak, and we will call on you. Or if you're on the phone, we will ask you if you have comments or questions to share. You can also text your questions to 505-980-6065, and we will read your text to those that are on the meeting tonight. And again, after this meeting, if you have additional comments, please provide us your comments by April 2nd. Thank you very much for participating in tonight's meeting. And now let's hear from you.
Very good. So thank you, everybody. We are now back from our pre-recorded presentation. And again, here is the information for sharing your comments through the different forms of media. And for tonight, again, if you would please type your comment in the chat box or raise your hand and we will call on you. So I'm going to ask Denise to please let me know if there's anything in the chat box. Denise?
Yes, so Travis Glenn wants to know, with the increase in traffic predicted, what is the expected time to upgrade to a 4-lane all the way from the state line to Roswell?
So thank you. That's a good question, and something that we looked at as our study team. As was mentioned by our project development engineer, AJ Romero, the traffic volumes on the road today are 2,000 to 3,000 vehicles per day. And by the year 2040, they're expected to increase to about 4,000 vehicles per day. The capacity operational analysis that we performed on this corridor showed that a 2-lane facility is adequate for the number of vehicles traveling this corridor all the way up until that 20-year time period. So we do not see a need for a 4-lane facility from the operational standpoint. As we mentioned earlier, we also looked at the safety components, and a 4-lane road is safer. However, we're able to mitigate all of the existing crashes and the safety concerns of this corridor by providing the passing lanes. The cost for this project, as I mentioned, based on our preferred alternative, is about 150 million. If we were to construct a 4-lane facility for this corridor, we would be well over $300 million for that construction cost. And so the cost for that is significantly high compared to the passing lane alternative. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't be able to continue monitoring this, and the district will be doing so. Because as I've mentioned before in previous meetings, if this corridor becomes more attractive, those traffic volumes could grow faster than we expected, and we could exceed that 4,000 vehicles sooner than expected. If we start getting that kind of attraction and we get more traffic on this and the operation starts to break down, then there's also the possibility of expanding this into a 4-lane into the future. But our first recommendation is to get this passing lane alternative designed and implemented to start mitigating the safety issues associated with this corridor. So hopefully that answers your question. AJ, is there anything you would want to add with that?
No, you covered it really well. You would start this.
Thanks for that
You
comment.
covered it really well. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks again, Travis. And is there any other comments, Denise?
Yeah, the next question is, will the posted speed limits change at all throughout this process?
So another good question. And right now, we are not looking to change the posted speed limit. We want to make sure that we keep the corridor safe. The posted speed limit out there is 65 miles per hour. However, there are a couple of areas where the existing vertical curves and the existing horizontal curves do not meet that 65 mile an hour. And so our recommended improvements are going to be modifying those areas that currently don't meet 65 mile an hour to make them to at least the 65 mile an hour or even a better design speed. If we're able to do that, there is a possibility that we could get this corridor at a higher posted speed limit. And that's something that will be looked at during the preliminary design phase. So as of right now, we are not proposing to raise the speed limit beyond what it is today. However, during the preliminary design, there is a possibility that we could work with the district to take a look at a higher speed. And the reason for that is if you travel this road into the Texas area, the speed limit on the Texas side is higher than the New Mexico side. And so if you have people coming in from Texas that are used to traveling 75 miles per hour, they may be exceeding the 65 mile an hour speed limit on this corridor. So we will take a look at it and decide if we can make this roadway safe enough to increase the speed limit during the preliminary design phase.
And then Craig and Pamela Dallas asked, could the corridor be considered a safety corridor requiring headlights to be turned on and increased speeding fines? And when is the passing lane to be implemented?
So any corridor can be applied for as a safety corridor. However, there are certain criteria that is needed in order for it to meet the safety corridor requirements. I don't have those off the top of my head, but I can tell you that based on the crash data results and the information we've seen along this corridor, I do not think that it would apply to become a safety corridor. I'll defer to the district and ask them to maybe talk a little bit more about that. But before I turn it over to the district, I also want to address your next one, and that is, when will this be implemented? As the district engineer Sanchez said at the beginning, we do not have construction funding yet identified for this project. So the Department of Transportation will be seeking funding to build whatever improvements we recommend and design. My job is to try to get the design completed as soon as possible so that this project is ready to go to construction as soon as funding can be identified. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to District Engineer Francisco Sanchez to talk a little bit about safety corridor and the timing, if you would, please, sir.
So, safety is paramount to the NMDOT. Safety corridor program was introduced in the late 2000s. The intent was to lower severe accidents and fatalities on highways. The safety program, generally the rule is 2 safety corridors per district. And so we have 2, and we recently added one additional one, New Mexico 128, which was having significant fatalities on that highway, a much higher rate than US 380. So right now, our intent is try to stay with 2. We're looking, since we got an additional 3rd, we're looking to remove 1 right now. But of course, anytime safety is involved, we're going to look at all options. So if it meets the criteria for safety, for a safety corridor, we'll definitely look into that. But right now, we want to be consistent with what the intent of the program was.
Thanks, Francisco. I appreciate that. And yeah, to go back and take a look at the safety numbers, which we did back in September when we did our presentation, the fatality rate and the severe crash rate on this corridor is lower than the state average. So yeah, I don't think it would qualify, but I do think there are some things that we can do with our design that would help in the safety. This corridor already has rumble strips on the shoulder. What we're looking at is in the areas where we introduce dedicated passing lanes to look at putting rumble strips in the center, which would help for preventing people from crossing over the center line into oncoming traffic. So there are some safety improvements that we will definitely be doing as part of this project. We're also going to be replacing the guardrail, as I mentioned earlier. There is roadside barriers out there today, but we're going to improve them to meet the current standards, which will improve the safety of the corridor as well. So thank you for the comment. Next, Denise.
So I believe Betty Hansen is recommending a 4-lane highway or passing lane every 3 miles, and to get rid of the chipped surface and put in a real asphalt over the smooth road. She says the surface just before the caprock is smooth asphalt, but after that under the surface is so wavy that her car asks if she needs a rest. So she's concerned about the decibel level and the damage caused by the shaking of her vehicle on the corridor, and wonders what the plan for surface improvement is. And then also questioned, there are going to be heavy trucks and passengers, and understands that the oil companies have promised money to help with the roads. Have they been involved with the cost of this?
Okay, so Denise, you'll have to make sure that I hit all of these, but I'll do my
I will.
So first, on the 4-lane, I think I explained that we did consider that, and we just did not see the benefit that we needed versus the cost. Now, that doesn't mean that this project cannot be looked at for 4 lanes in the future, but the intent is to implement these passing lanes to improve the safety and the operational concerns that we have today and for the next 20 years. If those traffic volumes grow beyond what we expect in the next 20 years, then there is a possibility that this would need to be looked at for a 4-lane in the future. In terms of the distance between the passing lanes, looking at every 3 to 4 miles, what you end up with is you end up with too many transitions in and out of a 2-lane facility, which could be confusing to the driver. the 5 to 10 mile range is what's recommended through FHWA's design criteria. What we looked at is the amount of traffic that actually queues up, and how often do we need those dedicated passing lanes to allow all of those vehicles to pass the slower moving vehicle, and then transition that back down into a single lane in each direction. And so we will be spacing those at a point where we can make sure that the queues do not back up as they do today, because there is not those passing opportunities. What was the next one, Denise?
Surface improvement.
And so, yeah, I brought this up, and I wanted to point out that we are going to be upgrading the pavement to improve the surfacing conditions to a good condition. Right now, we did an evaluation of the existing surface out there, and there's about 30% of the existing surface is in fair to poor condition. There's also another about 20 to 25% that is starting to deteriorate. So you're exactly right. There are some areas along that corridor that really need to be upgraded. And so the $150 million that I talked about earlier will make sure that we bring all of the pavement surfaces into a good condition when we're done with the construction of these improvements. The other thing that we looked at is the location of these passing lanes will be in areas where we're going to be avoiding drainage structures. So that helps us to keep the cost down so we can do more roadway improvements with the money that would be available. The second thing is we looked at putting these passing lanes in areas where there's poor pavement condition, or pavement condition that's going to start failing soon. And that way we can kill two birds with one stone. We can increase the safety and operation by adding the passing lane. At the same time, we can reconstruct the surfacing in that area to bring those pavement conditions into good condition. Next one, Denise.
Well, the last question was any opportunity for the oil companies to participate with the funding?
Yeah, and that one, I really don't know the answer to that. I know that there has been some discussions about how they can make some investments towards it, and try and match some of the funding. But Francisco, I don't know if you have any additional information on that one.
At this time, for that corridor, the oil and gas industry is not as prevalent as New Mexico 128 and US 285 and some of that Permian Basin. So we have not entered any discussions with the oil and gas industry, and they have not approached us to participate in any kind of funding for the US 380 corridor.
And Francisco, while you're there, maybe you can answer one of our following questions on what are the other safety corridors?
And actually misspoke. Recently, the district has added 2 new safety corridors, US 285 from Texas state line to 11 New Mexico, and then New Mexico 128. The 2 previous or original safety corridors for District 2, the first one was US 70 from Roswell to Ruidoso. After the redesign of that one got eliminated, and the 2 remaining was New Mexico 48 from Ruidoso out towards Capitan, and US 82, that portion of the Cloudcroft area.
Thank you. So then, Bert, some other additional questions. How many miles will be bid at one letting, and what is the anticipated duration of the construction period expected to be?
Yeah,
I combined a couple people's questions.
Okay, those are good questions, and that's something that, again, right now we don't have the amount of funding that's available, but the smallest that we would be looking at in terms of project size would be somewhere in the $15 to $20 million range. So that's really kind of the area that would be smallest, and anything smaller than that would not be very beneficial. If we're able to get $15 million construction project, we're probably able to build 2 passing lanes, 1 in each direction, and then improve the roadway in between those, and maybe an intersection or 2. And so, as you could see, I mean, we have 10 passing lanes in each direction. It would take it would take 10 projects to complete all of that. sweet spot that we feel would be best is if we can turn these projects out in 35 million to 30 to 35 million dollar project chunks. If we're able to do that, then we're able to build the entire corridor in about 5 projects, maybe even as little as 4 projects. So we'd be looking at 4 or 5 projects to complete the entire corridor. If Francisco's lucky and is able to convince the legislature or others at the federal level to give us 150 million all at once, then we would probably look at trying to get this project bid out in one complete corridor, or try to do the $35 million and just have them coming out one right after another. If we're fortunate in getting the 150 million and this project could start construction and go to completion of construction, we're probably looking at about an 18-month duration, maybe as much as 2 years at the most. But again, a lot of it just depends on the amount of money and when we're able to start the construction.
And so with that, we have a question for Monty about why not shoot for the moon and ask for the $300 million to start with.
So good question. And I think it would be good to shoot for the moon and ask for the 300 million. But as you know, the state of New Mexico is really strapped in terms of having enough funding or having enough money to fund the infrastructure that we need. And so we have to look at it on a statewide priority basis. And if we only need $150 million for this corridor to make the improvements to get us to the 20-year life of this corridor, then we can use that 150 million on other corridors. And I say we, the state can use the other 150 million to improve other corridors, whether it be in this district or other areas of the state that have similar needs. So it's really trying to figure out how to stretch your dollars to the best possible. Now, if the federal government was able to come up with a huge infrastructure package that ended up letting the DOT double or triple what they currently get, then you may be able to get 300 million for this corridor and still have enough money for the other 200 projects around the state that are underfunded. But that's really dreaming to be able to think that we could get that. So the idea is as a state, is to make sure that we only spend the money that we need to fix the problem that's at hand and stretch our dollars to be able to improve as many corridors as possible.
And then we have just a note here that there have been 3 additional fatalities since September of 2020 study. And, would that change anything? And can we just make sure that we're including that? Yes,
and we are aware of those additional fatalities and unfortunate deaths that occurred on this corridor. And, what that does is that just helps us to go to the policy decision makers and tell them that we need funding to get these improvements in place as soon as possible. It really does not change. I looked at the details of those accident records, and it really does not change the types of accidents that we saw along the corridor, and doesn't change the fact that if we make the improvements that we're recommending, that we would improve the safety. What it does change is that knowing that the longer we wait to make these improvements, the more opportunity there is for other accidents to occur. So that's really our push, is to try and use previous data and current crash data to try and show the importance of getting projects done as quickly as possible.
And then we have a note of support from Charla saying that they've seen so many wrecks and near wrecks on US 380, and this is very much needed. And I do think, Charla, that Bert answered the question on how long the construction will take. And then a comment from Jennifer on, if the federal infrastructure bill passes, will you change the recommendation to the 4-lane project to take advantage of that opportunity?
And again, I talked a little bit about that previously, but if there was enough money that came into the state coffers to be able to handle all of the infrastructure needs, and we're able to spend 300 million on here to get a 4-lane, then I could see where those plans would change. But there is I can't remember how many billions of dollars worth of need across the state of New Mexico, and to think that the infrastructure funding from the federal would be able to solve all of those needs and give us enough money to spend $300 million there is very unlikely.
So that's all the comments we have in the chat box, but I want to make sure that we give the people on the phone an opportunity. Sometimes it's a little hard to participate from the phone. If you do have a question, you can do *9 to raise your hand or *6 to unmute yourself and ask a question for those that are just on the phone and not on the Zoom meeting.
There is a hand up, it looks like, Denise.
It's hard to see everybody. Yes, okay, Travis.
Yes.
Go ahead, Travis, you can speak if you'd like.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. One more question that I had was whenever Texas put the passing lanes on the highway in Texas, they did it without slowing the traffic down. The speed limit stayed at 75 miles an hour while they were constructing it. It is the way you design these, is that going to be able to take place as well, or is it going to slow down or stop or create other safety hazards then? Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. Good question. And yeah, we have not started doing the layout for the construction zones yet. That'll be part of the preliminary design, but our intent is to try to use the additional lanes that we're doing to be able to be constructed offline as much as possible, leaving the existing road in place. There will be some areas when we're doing rehabilitation of the existing pavements on the 2-lane when we don't have passing lanes, that we will probably have to slow traffic down during short durations to allow for that rehab and maintenance work. But for the most part, we will be looking at trying to maintain traffic on the existing 2 lanes and do the passing lanes off to the side. So thank you for that comment, and something we will take a look at during the preliminary design. Denise, any other hands?
I don't see anything else. I'm scrolling around here, and
while she's looking, I also want to recognize that we have many elected officials on the call tonight. I know that the mayor of Tatum is on the line. I believe there are a few legislators from the area that have also joined us this evening. We want to really, thank you for your public service. First of all, we appreciate you taking on the challenge of being a public servant and doing what's best for our community. So thank you for that. And if there's anything you would like to say, feel free to raise your hand and we'll give you the opportunity to speak. Denise, is there any other comments?
the only thing is people were asking where they can get a copy of this presentation, and I was just typing back out that we'll put a copy of the presentation and a copy of the recording of the meeting on the project website. And then we also have a hand raised here by Gay Kernan.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, yes, it's Senator Kernan, and I just want to thank you very much for this very good meeting and answering so many questions. And certainly, it's certainly important to do this project. Money is always a concern. We always need more funding than we get through the state or the federal government, but we're certainly trying. I know Southeast New Mexico did receive additional funding over the last 2 years based on legislation that was passed regarding excise tax. And so I appreciate the department for directing that additional funding specifically for Southeast New Mexico over the past several years, and wish we could continue that, but I know there are other parts of the state that need funding as well, but we did benefit from that. So thank you again.
Senator Kernan, thanks for being with us. And again, thanks for your service at the legislature. You did a great job this past legislative session. I got to follow it quite a bit, so thank you. And we appreciate your support. Denise, anyone else looking?
I don't see anything else, but just reminding everyone that feel free to email in your comments to the project email that Bert has listed there, or go to the project website and put your comments on the interactive map, and we'd love to hear from you. And if you could get your comments in by April 2nd, that really helps us stay on schedule and keep the project moving forward.
And we will have the recording of this on that same website. We will also have a PDF version of the PowerPoint presentation in case you want to download that and share it with anyone in your communities. Feel free to do so. Also, you're welcome to contact us. If you have questions, feel free and send it in or call us, and we'll do our best to respond to those questions. AJ, any last minute words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just start my video real quick. Hey, okay, everybody, I just wanted us to thank everybody. There's no more questions. I'd like to thank everybody for your attendance and your participation in tonight's meeting. We look forward to a great design project and hopefully some funding so we can get this thing on the step and eventually built, you know. But like Deputy Secretary Padilla mentioned, please be patient. Like you just heard, funding, it's not really easy to come by funding, but please be patient, but we still look forward to this project. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.